Yo, what is up guys? Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So, some interesting news coming out of the super welterweight division. Unified champion Sebastian Fundora is vacating his WBO title in order to pursue a rematch with Tszyu. Of course, Sebastian Fundora beat Tszyu last year in a bloodbath of a fight, and in doing so he became a unified champion, winning both the WBO and WBC. But it seems like he's vacating the WBO because he had a mandatory due with Xander Zayas, the top rank super welterweight. Xander Zayas, young guy, early 20s, Puerto Rican, good boxer, solid, sort of smooth technical boxer, but young and still, I would say, unproven, but many would say dangerous. And I think at this stage, I think most people, well, I think a lot of people would have rather have seen Fundora versus Xander Zayas because it's something different. And we don't really know how good Xander Zayas is. I have my own opinions on Xander Zayas. Like I said, I think he's one of those fighters. He looks clean, he looks smooth, he looks technical, but I'm not sure whether he's got that nasty streak to take him to the next level. I'm not sure what happens when he gets tagged up. I'm not sure whether he's cut out for world level, quite frankly. But one thing I will say about Xander Zayas, he seems to be motivated to take the hard fights because, you know, when Virgil Ortiz was looking for an opponent in Saudi Arabia, Xander Zayas put his hand up and it seemed genuine. You know, he seemed to really want to fight Virgil Ortiz. I liked that. It never happened, but I liked the ambition. And, you know, he's been chasing this Fundora fight. Fundora, no matter what you make of him, is a hell of a prospect to fight. He's 6'5", 6'6", at super welterweight. Strong dude, hits hard, throws a lot of punches. He's a hard guy to fight just because of his size alone. And, yeah, Xander Zayas was running towards that one as well. So he's not got these big fights yet, Zayas, to prove himself. So while I'm sitting here doubting him, I do like the fact that he wants to prove himself. So it's not really a criticism of Xander Zayas in that sense. According to what's come out on Boxing Scene, Xander Zayas is likely to fight a guy called Jorge Garcia Perez for the vacant title, the vacant WBO title. Now, that's a good fight in and of itself because Perez recently is coming off a win over Charles Conwell. He beat Charles Conwell earlier this month in April. Charles Conwell, of course, was a highly thought of contender at 154. In fact, many people had Charles Conwell being the dark horse of 154, but Jorge Garcia, he upset Charles Conwell in his last fight and beat him up, in my opinion. And yeah, he's coming off good form, is Garcia. Also coming off a win over Abdu Kakarov in his previous fight to that. So Perez has climbed the ranks in recent times. Hard-nosed Mexican, brings pressure, brings power. That's a good fight for Xander Zayas. But still, although Perez beat Conwell, I don't think that's the sort of win that will get Zayas that kind of respect or necessarily push him to the next level or convince fans that he's proven. I like the fight for him. I think it would be his biggest step up. But again, it's not a Sebastian Fundora. It's not a Virgil Ortiz. But again, that's no fault of Xander Zayas. As for Sebastian Fundora, do we have to call this a duck? Because Tszyu, he still has standing in the division. He is a former champion, so it's not a bad opponent. But you look at what Tszyu has been coming off. You know, he lost to Fundora last year in that bloody fight. He was actually winning that fight until he got cut. He seemed in control. Then he suffered the bad cut. Then Fundora took over. But it was a brutal fight. Took a lot out of him, maybe. And then the fight after that, of course, Tszyu got brutalized and knocked out by Bakram Murtazaliev. So 2 losses in 2024 for Tszyu. Devastating losses in different ways. Came back this year to beat Joey Spencer, a guy I don't rate, a guy who nobody rates in the grand scheme of things. So that doesn't really show us where Tszyu's at. Is Tszyu damaged goods? Is Sebastian Fundora cherry picking here? Is he avoiding his mandatory, who could be dangerous, who could be high risk, to fight a bigger name, but maybe a guy who is not in the best of spots right now? Again, it doesn't look good because, you know, he's vacating his title as well by looks of it. So I think you're hard pressed not to call this a duck. It's not like Fundora isn't fighting his mandatory, but instead he's fighting, you know, another champion. It's not like he's fighting Murtazaliev. If he were to fight Murtazaliev, nobody would say he's ducking. Same if he were to fight Virgil Ortiz or even Boachuk. I don't think anybody would say he's ducking at that point. But the fact he's losing a title to rematch Tszyu, especially where Tszyu is at right now, I don't think it's a good look. And it's interesting as well because a few weeks ago, you know, Bob Arum of Top Rank was saying that how he, you know, PBC and Top Rank need to work together to combat, you know, the Saudi Arabian involvement in boxing, to combat Turki Al-Sheikh. And one of the fights he mentioned was Xander Zayas versus Sebastian Fundora. Doesn't look like PBC got the memo, Bob. Looks like you're actually going to have to make good fights yourself, bro. It's hilarious, isn't it? It's a shame, though, because I would have liked Fundora versus Zayas, but, you know, it's not to be. It looks like we're going to get Tszyu versus Fundora too. And I'm not even saying necessarily it's a bad fight, but, you know, it's certainly selective, right? The opponent selection is certainly selective. I will say that. Could still be a good fight, though. But, listen, we'll see what happens there. We'll see what happens. But I think the real winner here is Xander Zayas because, again, you know, he's shown a willingness to fight a tough opponent. For whatever reason, it hasn't worked out. Not of his fault. And he still gets his title shot against a decent fighter in Jorge Garcia Perez. So, and I do think we'll find out a bit more about Zayas in that Perez fight because Perez brings that pressure. He does. He brings that sort of pressure and he's got that sort of style to where if you're not at a certain level, if you're not on your game, he will expose you like he did with Charles Conwell. So, yeah, I'm interested in that fight. But share your thoughts below. Been your guy, Delboy. Peace.